There's a moment, and if you've been through it, you know exactly what I mean, when you stop suspecting and start knowing. For me, it happened in my own kitchen, 9:14 in the morning, holding a brown expandable folder that weighed almost nothing and somehow contained the entire collapse of my marriage. 14 pages, time-stamped photographs, hotel receipts, a name I recognized, and a second layer underneath all of it that I didn't see coming. Something that went beyond the affair and reached straight into my business, my contracts, my livelihood. She wasn't just cheating, she was helping someone dismantle me. And the worst part, at that exact moment she was 40 minutes into a spa weekend in Asheville, sipping cocktails by the pool, completely certain that I'd be home waiting when she got back. I wasn't. Before I take you back to how all of this started, tell me the time and where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far my stories travel. Consider liking and subscribing, but only if this one earns it. Now, let me walk you back a bit. My name is Garrett Cole. I'm 41 years old. I own a home renovation company out of Raleigh, North Carolina. 15 employees, solid reputation, the kind of business you build with your hands and your word over a decade of early mornings and late deliveries. I married Simone 8 years ago. She was a commercial real estate agent, the kind of woman who walked into networking events like she'd designed the room herself. Sharp, magnetic, the type who remembered names, laughed at the right moments, and made you feel like you were the only person worth talking to. For a while, I believed I was. We met at a Chamber of Commerce mixer. She handed me her card before I could ask for it. 2 years later, we got married on a Saturday afternoon in her mother's backyard under a canopy I'd built myself the week before. That version of Simone, the one who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during late movies, who'd show up at job sites with lunch because she happened to be nearby, that woman disappeared gradually. So gradually, I didn't notice it was gone until I was standing in an empty space where a marriage used to be. The first thing to go was the conversation. Not the words, those kept coming, but the meaning underneath them. We stopped talking about plans, stopped dreaming out loud. Every exchange became logistical. Groceries, schedules, which night week worked better for dinner with her parents. Then came the phone. Always within reach, always face down. She started stepping out of the room to answer calls that apparently couldn't wait 30 seconds. Then came the client dinners. Once a month became twice. Twice became weekly, and somewhere in between, my wife became someone I recognized only from a distance, polite, functional, and completely unreachable. I told myself it was the market. Real estate was demanding. She was building something. I convinced myself that if I just kept showing up, kept being steady, the version of her I married would come back. That's the thing about denial. It doesn't feel like lying. It feels like patience. But patience has a shelf life, and mine was running out faster than I knew. I tried. I want to be clear about that. The first time I brought up counseling, Simone looked at me like I'd suggested we sell the house and move into a tent. She laughed, not cruelly, just dismissively, and said we didn't need a stranger charging $200 an hour to tell us to communicate better. The second time, about 4 months later, she didn't laugh. She just looked tired. "Garrett, I'm not the therapy type," she said. "If something's wrong, we'll fix it ourselves." We didn't fix it. I planned a weekend away for our 7th anniversary, a cabin in the mountains, no cell service, just the two of us. She canceled 3 days before, said a major deal was closing and she couldn't step away. I made dinners. I adjusted my schedule to be home earlier. I asked questions and got half answers. I reached across the bed at night and found someone already turned away. You start to feel it in your body before your mind catches up, that low hum of something being off. Not dramatic enough to confront, not quiet enough to ignore, just there, like a crack in a foundation you keep walking over and pretending you don't see. The night that changed everything, I wasn't even looking for proof. It was a Wednesday, tax season. My bookkeeper, Linda, had been sorting through the previous year's expenses, flagging anything that didn't match up to submitted receipts. She called me around 4 p.m. with a question in her voice that told me she'd found something she didn't want to say out loud. I didn't respond right away. "Garrett, there are 3 charges to a place called the Bellamy. It's a boutique hotel, downtown. The dates are in October, November, and January." I didn't respond right away. I cross-referenced them with your project calendar, she continued carefully. You weren't traveling those nights, and the card used was the joint account. The Bellamy. I'd heard the name. Simone had mentioned it once, an upscale place where her firm sometimes hosted out-of-town clients. Except I checked. There were no client events on any of those dates. I thanked Linda, told her I'd look into it. Then I sat in my office for nearly an hour, staring at the wall, feeling that low hum rise into something sharper. That night, Simone came home late. She kissed my cheek, mentioned the traffic had been terrible, and disappeared into the bathroom for 20 minutes. I didn't ask about her day. I didn't say much at all, because for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't interested in what she wanted me to believe. I was interested in what was actually true. And that shift, that one internal change, was the beginning of everything. I didn't tell her. I didn't confront. I just made a decision, quietly, while she sat across from me at the dinner table scrolling through her phone. I was going to find out exactly who my wife had become. The name came from a contractor I'd worked with on a commercial build 2 years prior, Vince Callahan, former military intelligence, 15 years private security consulting, and a reputation for discretion that extended across 3 states. He finds things people bury, the contractor told me, and he doesn't talk about it after. I made the call on a Thursday morning from my truck, parked outside a job site, engine off, hands steadier than I expected. Vince answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, unhurried, the kind of tone that suggested nothing I could say would surprise him. I gave him the short version, the hotel charges, the distance, the patterns I couldn't explain away anymore. He asked 3 questions. How long had I noticed changes? Did she have close friends who might provide cover? Had anything changed in my professional life that felt connected? That last question threw me. I told him no. He made a sound that wasn't quite agreement. Give me 10 days, he said. I'll have a preliminary report. If there's nothing to find, you'll know. If there is, you'll have documentation. 10 days. I don't know if you've ever had to wait for something you already know is going to hurt you. It's a specific kind of torture. Not the sharp pain of impact, that comes later. This is the slow motion approach, the countdown to a collision you can see coming but can't stop. I went to work, ran my crews, walked through client consultations like I was still the same man I'd been 6 months earlier. At night, I came home, sat across from Simone, watched her tap through her phone, and wondered what the folder would contain. She left for a wine club gathering that Saturday. She came back smelling faintly of something that wasn't wine. She mentioned a client dinner the following Tuesday. I checked the restaurant she named. It had been closed for renovations for 3 weeks. The lies weren't even good anymore. They didn't need to be. She'd stopped expecting me to check. That confidence, that casual arrogance should have made me angry. Instead, it made me patient, because every lazy lie she told was another line in the case I hadn't started building yet, but already knew I would. Day 7, Vince sent a text. On track, more than anticipated, will call Friday. More than anticipated. I read those 3 words probably 100 times over the next 48 hours. They didn't make me anxious, they made me cold. Not numb, cold. The kind of clarity that only arrives when you've already made peace with the worst-case scenario. Friday came. My phone buzzed at 11 a.m. Vince's number. I've got the report, he said. We should meet in person. There's a layer here you're going to want explained. A layer. I told him I'd be there by noon. I hung up and stood in my kitchen looking out the backyard I'd landscaped the summer after we moved in. The stone path I'd laid myself, the garden bed along the fence where Simone used to plant tomatoes before she stopped caring about things that required tending. In less than an hour, I was going to open a folder that would show me exactly who I'd been married to. And whatever was inside, there was no version of this where I came home the same man who left.
Vince Callahan worked out of a small office in a converted warehouse near the industrial district. No signage, no receptionist, just a steel door with a keypad and a single camera mounted above it. He buzzed me in without a word. The office was sparse. 2 desks, a wall of filing cabinets, and a window that looked out onto nothing in particular. Vince was already seated when I walked in, the brown folder centered on the table between us like evidence at a trial. He didn't offer small talk. I appreciated that. Everything's documented, he said, sliding the folder toward me. Dates, times, locations, photographs. I've organized it chronologically. What you do with it is your decision. I opened the cover. The first page was a summary sheet, 12 entries over 10 days. My eyes moved down the list and each line landed heavier than the last. October 14th, the Bellamy Hotel, room 412, 7:42 p.m. arrival, 11:18 p.m. departure. November 3rd, dinner at Cerulean, corner booth, 2 hours, 14 minutes. January 9th, the Bellamy again, different room, same pattern. Behind the summary were photographs, clear, unambiguous, Simone and a man I recognized immediately, Derek Hansen. I knew him, not well, but well enough. He ran a commercial development firm that had partnered on 2 projects with contractors I'd bid against. Tall, easy confidence, the kind of handshake that lingered a second too long because he wanted you to remember it. I'd met him once at an industry mixer. He'd called me Buddy instead of my name. Now I was looking at a photograph of him standing beside my wife outside a hotel entrance, her hand resting on his forearm like it belonged there. I turned the page. "There's more," Vince said, and this is the part I mentioned on the phone. The next section contained photographs from a different location, a beach resort, Palmetto Dunes, the kind of place you book for a long weekend when you want to disappear. This trip was from 5 months ago. Simone had told me it was a wine club getaway, 3 days with the girls, nothing fancy. What the photographs showed was something else entirely. 3 women, 3 men, none of them husbands. Simone was there with Derek. Beside her was Meredith Lang, her closest friend since they'd worked together at her first brokerage, and next to Meredith was a man I didn't recognize. The third woman was Simone's cousin, Vanessa, married for 6 years to a financial advisor named Paul. In the photograph, she was leaning against a man who was definitely not Paul. The friend, Meredith, has been seeing a guy named Troy Weber for about 7 months. Her husband, Keith, either doesn't know or doesn't want to. Based on some activity I flagged, he may have his own situation. Mutually assured silence. "And the cousin?" I asked. "Vanessa's guy is named Jared Cross. Relationship's newer, 4 months, maybe 5. Her husband, Paul, doesn't seem aware. Or if he is, he's choosing not to act. Word is he's financially dependent on her family's money. Boat's not getting rocked." I sat back. 3 women, 3 affairs. One tidy little system where everyone covered for everyone else because exposure would mean mutually assured destruction. They used each other as alibis, coordinated weekends, cross-referenced stories. Whoever got questioned by a husband could point to the others as witnesses. Type "I knew it" in the comments if you saw this coming before I did. Because I didn't. Not this. Not a system this deliberate. "How solid is the documentation?" I asked. "Solid enough that no attorney will argue it away," Vince replied. He closed his notebook. "But there's one more thing, and this one's going to land differently." He paused, looked at me directly. "Derek Hansen's company has been bidding on the same municipal contracts you've been chasing for the past 18 months, 3 of them specifically. And in all 3 cases, his bids came in just under yours, by margins that suggest he knew your numbers before he submitted." I felt my jaw tighten. "That's not coincidence," Vince said. "That's access." I didn't say anything for a long moment. Vince let the silence sit. He'd clearly delivered news like this before. He knew what it took to process. Derek Hansen hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He'd been using her to gut my business. The 3 contracts Vince mentioned, I remembered each of them. The Ridgeline Commons project, the downtown parking structure, the Maplewood Municipal Complex. All 3 had gone to competitors with bids that undercut mine by just enough to win without raising suspicion. I'd chalked it up to bad luck, market fluctuation, maybe a leak somewhere in my estimating process. Turns out the leak had been sitting across from me at dinner every night. "Your wife has access to your business accounts?" Vince asked. "She's on the company credit card. She's handled some invoicing when my office manager was out. She knows where the files are." "Then she had access to your bid documents." I thought about the nights Simone had stayed up late catching up on work emails. The times she'd borrowed my laptop because hers was updating. The casual questions about which projects I was excited about, which contracts I really wanted to land. I thought I was being supported. Turns out I was being surveilled. "I can't prove she passed the numbers directly," Vince said carefully, "but the pattern is there.
3 bids, 3 losses, all to the same competitor, all within a margin that suggests inside knowledge. I exhaled slowly. "What's his exposure?" I asked. "Hanson's." "Professional, mostly. If it came out that he was obtaining competitor pricing through a personal relationship with their spouse, his reputation takes a hit. Possibly his licensing, depending on how aggressive the board wants to be. But that's a long game, and it requires you going public." Going public. That phrase sat in my chest like a weight. I wasn't interested in spectacle. I wasn't interested in dragging my name or my company's name through the mud just to watch Derek Hansen squirm. But I also wasn't interested in letting him walk away clean. Moments like this are exactly why I pay attention now, because betrayal doesn't always stop at one part of your life. The affair was personal, the sabotage was professional, and the woman I'd married had handed them both the keys. I closed the folder. "What about the other husbands, Keith and Paul? Do they know?" "Unknown," said Vince, "but if you want to find out, I can get you contact information." I thought about it. If I was going to move on this, really move, I needed to know who else might be standing with me, or if I was standing alone. "Get me the numbers," I said. I reached out to Keith Lang first. He was an operations manager at a logistics company, mid-40s, the kind of guy who probably coached Little League and grilled steaks on Sundays. I found him through a mutual contact and suggested coffee. He agreed, which told me he already suspected something was wrong. We met at a cafe near his office. I kept it simple. Told him I had reason to believe our wives were covering for each other. Didn't show him the photographs, not yet, but gave him enough of the timeline to see the pattern. He listened without interrupting. Then he leaned back and rubbed his jaw the way men do when they're trying to buy time before saying something they don't want to say. "Look, Garrett, Meredith and I have had our problems. We've talked about it. She knows I know things aren't right. And?" He hesitated. "And I'm not exactly in a position to throw stones." So that was it. Keith had his own situation. Meredith had hers. Neither one was going to blow up the other because the fallout would be mutual. He thanked me for telling him, said he appreciated the honesty. Then he shook my hand, wished me luck, and walked back to his car without looking back. One down. Paul was harder to reach, Vanessa's husband. I finally got him by phone 2 days later. He listened to what I said, didn't interrupt, didn't react. When I finished, there was a silence that stretched long enough to feel deliberate. "I appreciate the heads up," he said finally, "but Vanessa and we handle things privately." "Privately meaning what?" Another pause. "Meaning I'm not in a position to make waves right now." I understood. Paul lived in a house Vanessa's family helped pay for, drove a car her father had financed. His entire life was built on a foundation someone else owned. He wasn't going to bite the hand. 2 conversations, 2 men who knew something was wrong and neither one willing to stand up. If you've ever had to stand up alone because the people who should have stood with you wouldn't, you already understand why I stopped asking for permission. I sat on my back porch that night with a beer I didn't finish, watching the sun go down behind the fence I'd built 3 summers ago. Simone was inside, on her phone, laughing at something I couldn't hear. I thought about the folder locked in my truck, the photographs, the timeline, the system of lies that had been running smoothly for nearly 2 years because everyone involved had something to lose and no one had the spine to stop it. No one except me. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a family attorney named Regina Pace. She'd handled my cousin's custody case and came with a reputation for being methodical and unmovable. I told her I needed a consultation. Divorce, asset protection, real estate. She had an opening the following Tuesday. The second call was to a moving company, local, licensed, discreet. I told them I'd need a crew in 10 days. They asked if I needed packing services. I told them no. I'd handle that part myself. The spa weekend arrived on a Friday. Simone had been counting down for 2 weeks. Asheville, 3 nights. She'd mentioned the resort's mineral pools at least 4 times, the couples massage Meredith had pre-booked, the rooftop bar Vanessa had found on some influencer's page. 3 women who needed to decompress. That was the word she used. Decompress. I carried her suitcase to the car. She kissed my cheek at the door, her perfume settling around me like a question I no longer needed answered. "Don't just work the whole time I'm gone," she said, smiling. "I'll try to survive," I told her. She laughed, the easy, unburdened laugh of a woman who had no idea what was about to happen to her life. I watched her pull out of the driveway, watched the car around the corner, stood there for another 30 seconds after she was gone, just to make sure. Then I went inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. I gave it exactly 12 minutes, enough time for her to hit the highway, enough distance that turning back would require a decision, not a reflex. Then I made the call. The movers arrived at 1:45, two-man crew. I'd booked them under my name, paid in advance, requested discretion. They were professional, quiet, the kind of men who'd done this before and understood that sometimes a job was more than just furniture. I walked them through the house once. My clothes, my tools from the garage, the ones my father gave me, the ones I'd collected over 15 years of renovation work, the drafting table in my home office that I'd restored from a salvage find the first winter we lived here, my books, my files, the framed photo of my first completed commercial project, the one I kept above my desk because it reminded me what I could build when I believed in something. And Scout, our 4-year-old lab mix who had been watching the whole operation from the hallway with his head cocked, like he was trying to decide which side he was on. When I opened the back door of my truck, he jumped in without hesitation. Good boy. At least one of us had his priorities straight. I left Simone's things exactly where they were. Her closet, organized by color and season. Her bathroom counter, lined with products that cost more than some of my power tools. Her decorative pillows. Her wine collection. I left the wedding photo on the bedroom dresser. Face up, centered. I left my keys on the kitchen counter. No note. What would I have written? Good luck? You should have tried harder? There was nothing left to say that the empty closets wouldn't say better. My phone buzzed around 4 p.m. Video call. Simone's name. I was standing in the living room, half empty now, the outline of missing furniture visible on the carpet like chalk lines at a crime scene. I leaned against the doorframe, took one breath, and answered. Her face filled the screen, sun-flushed, happy, a cocktail glass hovering at the edge of the frame, condensation running down the side. "Hey, babe," she grinned. "You have to see this view." She panned the camera. Mountains, blue sky, Meredith waving from a lounge chair, Vanessa laughing at something off-screen. 3 women, 3 lies, one coordinated system running smooth as a Swiss watch. "Looks amazing," I said. "You okay? You seem tired." "Long day, but good, really good, actually." She blew a kiss at the camera and hung up in under 2 minutes. Efficient. Routine. The way you check a box on a list you've stopped caring about. I slid the phone into my pocket and looked at the room around me. The movers were loading the last of the boxes. "You have no idea," I said quietly to no one. "You have absolutely no idea what's waiting for you." Scout looked at me from the truck. I swear that dog understood more than he let on. We were out by 6:15. The apartment was on the east side of Raleigh. 3rd floor, clean layout, good light, nothing special, but mine. I'd signed the lease 11 days earlier from a personal account Simone had never known existed. Nolan met me there with pizza and 2 beers. He didn't ask questions. He'd walked his own version of this road 6 years ago. Different details, same architecture of betrayal. He knew what this kind of silence meant. We sat on boxes that hadn't been unpacked yet, eating pizza off paper plates, and he raised his bottle in my direction. "To the next chapter," he said. I touched my bottle to his. "To building something that's actually mine."
Sunday came in slow. I spent the morning at the apartment, unpacking what I could. Books on the shelf, clothes in the closet, Scout's bed in the corner of the living room where he'd already claimed a patch of sunlight like he'd been living there for years. The airline app told me Simone's flight was scheduled to land at 6:47 p.m. I'd already deleted the shared location tracking, changed my own settings. I didn't need to watch her move through the world anymore. Whatever came next would find me on its own. It found me at 7:19. My phone lit up, Simone's name. I looked at it for a long moment, longer than I needed to, and let it ring through. She called again at 7:23, then 7:26, then 3 more times before 7:35. The gaps kept shrinking, each call arriving faster than the last, like she was punching redial before the voicemail had finished recording. I moved the phone to the bedroom nightstand and went back to the living room, opened a book I'd been meaning to read for months. Got through 4 pages without absorbing a word, but that wasn't the point. The point was that I was sitting in my own space, in my own quiet, and for the first time in 2 years the silence didn't feel like something rotting. It felt like something healed. The voicemails started after call 7. I didn't listen to them. Didn't need to. I already knew what they'd contain. Confusion first, then demand, then something sharp and unsteady underneath. Simone didn't handle uncertainty well. She managed every room she walked into, positioned herself 3 moves ahead in every conversation. Walking into an empty house with no explanation had stripped her of every tool she relied on. I thought about that, felt nothing resembling guilt. The texts started around 8 p.m. First few were clipped, professional, the tone of a woman accustomed to being answered because she'd always been answered. "Garrett, call me. This isn't a joke. Where are you? Where's Scout?" That one made me pause. The dog before the husband, though maybe I'd been second on her list for longer than I realized. Over the next hour, the messages shifted, not softer, rawer. The composure was cracking in real time. Then, at 9:42 p.m., the message that told me everything. "Is this about Derek?" Not "who's Derek?" Not "what are you talking about?" Not even a half-constructed denial. Just that. 4 words confirming she'd already done the math and landed on the only answer available. The lie reflex, the engine that had been running smooth for 19 months, had finally stalled, because there was nowhere left for it to go. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. She hadn't even tried to build an alternative. That told me more about how long this had been happening than any photograph in Vince's folder ever could. I didn't respond that night. Turned off the ringer, made sure Scout was settled on his bed, went to sleep at 10:30. Slept better than I had in a year and a half, which told me more about what I'd been carrying than I'd ever let myself admit. Monday morning brought a different kind of message, not frantic, calculated. "We need to talk like adults. Walking away doesn't solve anything." Walking away. The reframe had already begun. If I'd walked away, then I was the impulsive one, the emotional one, the one who couldn't handle a difficult conversation. She was already editing the story, positioning herself as the reasonable partner, waiting patiently for me to come to my senses. I forwarded the message to Regina Pace with one line. "She's beginning to construct a narrative, keeping you informed." Regina replied within an hour. "Noted. Maintain silence. Let her continue." That was exactly my plan.
She found me on Wednesday. Not at the apartment. She didn't have that address yet. She found me at a job site in North Raleigh, a kitchen renovation I'd been managing for the past 3 weeks, which meant she'd either called my office or talked to someone who knew my schedule. I was reviewing tile samples with my foreman when I saw her car pull onto the gravel access road. She stepped out slowly, charcoal blazer, hair pulled back, sunglasses pushed up on her head. The posture was too straight, the kind of rigid composure that comes not from confidence, but from holding yourself together by sheer will. I told my foreman I'd be 5 minutes, walked toward her, stopped at a distance that made it clear this wasn't going to be a long conversation. "You didn't call," she said. "No." "Garrett," her voice had that careful, measured quality of someone rehearsing every word before it left her mouth. "I understand you're upset. I understand that something happened and you needed space. But emptying the house, taking Scout, disappearing, that's not how 2 people who've been together for 8 years handle a problem." I let that sit for a moment. "You're right," I said. "That's not how 2 people who've been together for 8 years handle a problem. But that's not what this is." Her jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not upset, Simone. I'm not having a moment. I'm not going to cool down, come home, and pretend the last 19 months didn't happen." I kept my voice level, the same tone I'd use reading a contract clause. "I know about Derek Hansen. I know about the Bellamy. I know about Palmetto Dunes, the real version, not the wine club story. I know about Meredith and Troy. I know about Vanessa and Jared. I know about the system you built to cover for each other." The shift behind her eyes was subtle. Simone was too practiced for anything obvious, but I saw it. The moment when the script she'd prepared became useless and the person underneath had to scramble to catch up. "You had me followed," she said flatly. "I had the truth confirmed. There's a difference." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I wasn't happy, Garrett. I know that's not an excuse, but then don't use it as one. Silence. I saw it. I brought up counseling twice. You dismissed it both times. I planned an anniversary weekend. You canceled 3 days before. I adjusted my schedule. I made dinners. I showed up. You just stopped wanting me to. I paused. That's not drowning. That's choosing. Her eyes went glassy. Not tears yet, but the warning sign of them. So that's it? 8 years and you're just done? I was done the moment you decided I wasn't worth honesty. I took a step back, created distance. You'll be hearing from my attorney, Regina Pace. She's thorough, so I'd suggest getting representation quickly. Garrett, I'm not angry, I said, clear enough that anyone on the site who happened to be listening would hear it. I genuinely hope you figure out what you're looking for, but you're going to have to find it somewhere else. I turned and walked back toward the job site, didn't look back. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no car door, no voice calling after me. Just the specific silence of someone standing in the wreckage of a story they thought they controlled. But something about the way she said, "That's it," stayed with me longer than expected. Not because it changed anything, because even now, standing face to face with documented proof, she still believed there was a version of this where she kept everything. That kind of confidence doesn't disappear overnight, which meant whatever came next wasn't going to be clean. The mediation took 4 hours. Regina Pace dismantled every position Simone's attorney attempted, with documentation so thorough it felt surgical. The abandonment claim collapsed under the weight of Vince's report. The house, purchased in my name 18 months before the marriage, stayed mine. The business remained untouched. Simone looked at me once across the table. 3 seconds. I held her gaze without expression. She looked away first. The agreement was signed that afternoon. Clean. Final. Done. 3 months later, I was standing in a different version of my life. The business had landed 2 new municipal contracts, projects Derek Hansen's firm had quietly stopped bidding on after words circulated through professional channels about how he'd been obtaining competitor pricing. He hadn't been fired, he'd just become radioactive, the kind of name people stopped returning calls to. I'd moved into a house I renovated myself. Small lot, solid bones, a workshop in the back where scouts slept on a pile of drop cloths while I built things that belonged to no one but me. Nolan came by most Saturdays with beer. We'd sit on the back deck and talk about nothing important. He never asked how I was doing anymore. He could see it. Then, on a Tuesday evening, my phone rang. Meredith Lang. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Her voice was different than I remembered, stripped of the social polish, raw in a way I hadn't heard before. "Keith left," she said. "Last week. Found out about Troy on his own." I stayed quiet. "Vanessa's situation is falling apart too. Paula finally talked to a lawyer." "Why are you telling me this?" A long pause. "Because I want to expose all of it, the system, how it worked, who was involved. I want Derek Hansen's name attached to what he did to your business, but I can't do it alone. I need someone who has the documentation, someone who already walked through it and came out the other side." She paused. "I need your help, Garrett." I sat with that for a long time. Scout lifted his head from the floor. The house was quiet. The clock on the wall ticked steady. "Tell me which part of this story hit you hardest. Let me know where you're watching from. If you want more stories like this, you already know what to do." I thought about the folder, the photographs, the 19 months I'd spent being dismantled by someone who promised to build with me. I thought about Keith and Paul, men who wouldn't stand when it mattered. And I thought about the woman on the phone, finally ready to fight a war she helped create. Going back in meant reopening everything, every document, every memory, every wound I'd spent 3 months learning to walk away from. But staying out meant letting the system survive, letting Derek Hansen fade into quiet irrelevance instead of facing what he'd done, letting the next version of me, some other man who hadn't seen it coming, walk straight into the same trap. Meredith was still on the line, waiting. I opened my mouth to answer. "If you think this is where it ends, it's not. There's another story waiting that will make this satisfying. Click the video on your screen. I'll meet you there."